At Hegeum High School, a teacher stood before Class 5, expressing how it felt as if it had only been yesterday when she first introduced herself to 32 students. She said it was unfortunate that the time had now come for her to say goodbye. Her name was Maria Chung, and she served as the homeroom teacher for the senior Class 5. While addressing the students, she recalled how there had been times filled with laughter and joy when they had shared wonderful moments. At other times, there had been miscommunications and misunderstandings that had caused emotional wounds among them. Yet, whenever they saw their friends facing hardship or distress, they had offered each other comfort and support. Reflecting on the past year, she mentioned that many things had taken place and expressed her hope that every moment the students had experienced there would remain with them as cherished memories. The teacher then congratulated the seniors of Class 5 on their graduation. As she finished speaking, the students burst into cheers, celebrating their special day with great excitement and happiness. Among the students was a girl named Han Sojung, who thought that everything had finally come to an end. However, she could never have imagined that all 32 seniors of Class 5 would one day reunite for such an unforgettable experience on a deserted island. 6 months later, Han Sojung was working at a restaurant, calling out loudly for number 517, saying that the chicken set was ready. She was the class president of Class 5, currently enrolled at University S as a mathematics major and working part-time at Burgerland. Turning toward the kitchen, she called for 2 more beef patties. A man named Lee Suntae, who was also working there, responded that he would prepare them right away. He commented that it was such a busy day as he continued forming the patties and assembling burgers. His name was Lee Suntae, the vice president of Class 5, and like Sojung, he was enrolled at University F. Sojung again asked him to prepare 20 nuggets and 2 cheese sticks. He confirmed the order, repeating that he would get 20 nuggets and 2 cheese sticks ready. Then, announcing that the 2 additional beef patties were done, he handed them over, and Sojung thanked him. Later that evening, after a long and exhausting workday, both of them sat outside the restaurant, remarking that the day had been absolutely hectic. They looked utterly drained. Letting out a weary sigh, he remarked that Thursdays always felt like a nightmare because of the half-price event that brought an endless flood of customers. Turning toward Sojung, he hesitated for a moment before speaking again, saying that there was something he had been curious about for quite some time. She lifted her head slightly and asked about it. He explained that since both of them were students at University S, they could easily earn more money by tutoring. Looking genuinely puzzled, he asked the reason she continued working there instead of choosing the easier and more profitable path. Sojung gave a small, tired smile. She said quietly that tutoring, for her, would feel stressful rather than rewarding. She explained that she would feel burdened by the idea of having to take responsibility for someone else's learning and progress. He looked at her curiously, leaning back a little as he asked if that was truly how she felt. Then, as if realizing the irony of his own situation, she laughed softly and said that instead of standing there drenched in sweat every day, he should probably be asking himself the same question. The reason he hadn't chosen tutoring either. He paused for a second, saying that in truth, his reasons weren't that different from hers. Sojung frowned slightly in confusion, tilting her head. She said that she didn't quite understand his words, but before he could respond, her attention shifted to the phone in her hand. Absent-mindedly scrolling, her expression suddenly changed to one of surprise. She exclaimed that some girls from her major had uploaded a new post on Instagram. On her phone's screen, there was a photo of 3 girls sitting together, smiling brightly under the sun. The caption beneath was that they were spending their time in Bali and drinking cocktails. The image seemed to radiate luxury and freedom, the kind of carefree joy that felt unreachable to her at that moment. Sojung's eyes lingered on the screen for a few seconds. She sighed deeply and murmured that she was so jealous of them. A faint frustration appeared in her tone as she said that she barely had time to rest, let alone travel anywhere, and that even buying food felt like a struggle these days. Just then, the familiar ding of a notification sounded from Sontae's phone. He took it out, glancing at the screen, and his eyebrows furrowed slightly. When he opened the message, it turned out to be a web notification. It read about alumni reunion on the abandoned island. Join them and receive 10,000 won, play an interesting game, and relive their graduation memories. At the bottom, there was a clickable link inviting the user to register. Sojung's phone vibrated at the same moment, showing the same strange notification. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she read it. The idea of an alumni reunion on an abandoned island seemed both ridiculous and oddly intriguing. She looked over at Sontae to see his reaction, and he was already glancing in her direction with the same puzzled look. He raised his phone slightly toward her, showing the message on his screen, and told her that he had received the same notification too. Later that night, under the shimmering shimmering lights of the Love Tower, a couple stood there hand in hand, their figures illuminated by the soft glow of the city below. The girl looked up at the breathtaking view, her voice filled with quiet wonder as she said that the sky looked as if someone had painted it with a delicate brush. Her expression shifted, and she said softly that they only had 4 months left before the CSAT exam. There was a tremor in her voice as she confessed that she was terrified of failing it a second time. The boy, standing beside her, squeezed her hand reassuringly and told her not to worry too much. His tone was calm but firm, carrying the steady warmth of someone who truly cared. He said that since they had been studying so hard together, he was sure they would get good results this time. She turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting both the city lights and her affection, and called his name gently, Byung-woo. Then, smiling faintly, she thanked him. He blinked, slightly surprised, and asked the reason she was thanking him. Her full name was Hee Young-yeon, and she spoke with quiet sincerity as she told him that he had always been there for her, encouraging her, comforting her, and cheering her on even when she had been at her lowest. She said that his words and presence had given her strength when she had none left. Her boyfriend, Kim Byung-woo, was also a graduate of Class 5 and attended the same cram school as her in Noryangjin. Hearing her words, he looked at her with affection so deep that it seemed to silence everything else around them. In his mind, a thought echoed that he didn't deserve someone as kind, gentle, and radiant as her. His thoughts drifted backwards, slipping into a quiet flashback. He remembered how, ever since their senior year, he had admired her from afar. Back then, she had seemed untouchably kind and pretty, and for someone like him, awkward, quiet, and not particularly confident, just talking to her had felt like an impossible dream. One day, he had finally found the courage to greet her. To his surprise, she recognized him immediately and asked if his name was Byung-woo. He remembered how startled and thrilled he had been at that simple acknowledgement. Later, by fate, they met again at the cram school he attended. From that point on, small moments had started to connect them, and shyly asked if he could sit beside her. She always smiled, thanking him, and said they should attend the same class together. Unlike during high school, he had found the strength to talk to her more openly, and since they were both struggling with the same academic pressures, they had quickly grown close. Their bond had deepened naturally until they became a couple. Returning to the present, Byung-woo looked at her standing beside him and kissed her. He thought to himself that she truly felt like an angel, and that he needed to keep himself grounded, to never let selfishness or insecurity ruin what they had. As they began walking toward home, Yoongun spoke softly, her gaze lowered to the path ahead. She admitted that lately she felt as though she were stuck in a slump and couldn't concentrate on studying. He told her gently that the reason she was feeling this way was probably because she had been studying non-stop without taking any real breaks. She looked at him uncertainly and asked if he really thought she needed to take a break. Her tone was hesitant, as though she wanted to believe him, but couldn't quite allow herself to. Before he could say more, they reached her home. Standing at the gate, she smiled softly and thanked him for walking her there. He waved it off with a warm smile, saying that it was no problem at all, and told her to sleep well, promising that he would text her later. As he turned away and began walking toward his own place, both of their phones vibrated at the same time. The identical notification tone rang out. Both of them stopped in surprise and checked their screens almost instinctively. To their astonishment, each had received the same message that an alumni reunion invitation for the graduates of Class 5. The notification mentioned that the event would take place on an abandoned island and that participants would receive 10,000 won for attending and joining an interesting game. Younggun turned toward him with curious eyes, holding up her phone. She told him that they were apparently offering 10,000 won for the reunion trip. He looked at his phone and nodded, saying that he had received the same notification. The odd coincidence made both of them pause. After a brief silence, she said thoughtfully that since she had been feeling stuck and unmotivated lately, maybe taking a short break wouldn't be such a bad idea. If the message wasn't some kind of scam, she thought, perhaps it could be refreshing. It had been such a long time since they had seen their old classmates, and reconnecting with them might even help lift her mood. Her words, however, made Byung-woo's chest tighten slightly. Though she spoke with a light and hopeful tone, he couldn't share her enthusiasm. The thought of meeting their former classmates again stirred a quiet dread inside him. His memories of high school were not filled with warmth like hers. As her voice faded into the night air, his mind slipped into a painful flashback, one that still haunted him deeply. He remembered himself as a timid high school boy, cornered by a group of his classmates. Their expressions had been cruel, their laughter sharp and taunting. One of them sneered at him, saying that there were 7 of them and demanding to know the reason he had only brought 3 burgers. He could still recall the sting of humiliation and the ache in his body as he lay on the ground, his clothes dusty, his cheek pressed against the cold floor. Trembling, he had stammered that he was sorry and that he didn't have enough money, but his apology had only earned him more mockery. The memory struck him with a familiar bitterness. Snapping back to the present, he realized that Yungun was still speaking, her voice filled with cheerful excitement as she said that the reunion actually sounded like a great idea. She suggested that they should go together. Byungwoo forced a small smile, though his expression betrayed the tension in his chest. He said quietly that, sure, they could go together. Though he didn't want to disappoint her, he couldn't stop the flood of anxious thoughts. On the other side of the city, a girl was in the middle of an intense dance practice session with her teammates. The mirrored walls reflected their synchronized movements, and the rhythm of their steps echoed through the practice room. Her name was Choi Yesu, a graduate of Class 5 who was now preparing to debut as an idol under a small entertainment company. When the music finally stopped and the practice session came to an end, all of the team members collapsed on the floor, panting heavily. One of her teammates, smiling faintly despite the exhaustion, said that they must all be tired from practicing so late into the night. She added that with less than 6 months left until their debut, they had to stay strong and keep going because they could do it. Yesu sat down on the floor when her phone buzzed beside her. She reached for it absent-mindedly, and upon unlocking the screen, she noticed a new message. It was from Hwang Wudam, one of her former classmates. The message read that if she had some time after practice, they should meet for a light drink by the Hangang River. Before she could even react, one of her teammates leaned closer, catching a glimpse of the name on her phone screen. Raising her eyebrows playfully, she asked if the boy messaging her was Hwang Wudam and whether he was asking her out later that night. Caught off guard, Yesu hesitated for a second before admitting softly that yes, it was him. Before she could finish explaining, her teammate grinned and exclaimed that she was 100% sure he liked her. Another girl from the group immediately joined in, clearly excited, asking in disbelief if it was really the Wang Wudam, the one who had been getting attention online lately. She told Yesu that if he was the one texting her, she should definitely consider dating him. Flustered, Yesu tried to calm them down. She told them to relax and said that it wasn't like that at all. She explained that he just messaged her once in a while since they were former classmates, nothing more. Meanwhile, in a motel room across town, Wang Wudam, also a graduate of Class 5, was checking his phone. Wudam was recently signed with a modeling agency and had become a rising social media personality, boasting nearly 25,000 followers. He was slowly gaining recognition, his face appearing in online ads and small magazine spreads, and many were calling him a trending rookie star. When he saw Yesu's reply, his expression shifted slightly. She had texted back that she didn't have any plans later, but was far too tired from hours of practice and just wanted to go home and sleep. Reading that message left him feeling frustrated and disappointed. He leaned back against the wall, tossing his phone beside him with a sigh, as if the reply had deflated all his anticipation. At that moment, he was not alone. He was busy doing wholesome cardio training with a woman who was with him in the room. Her name was Choi Jung, 28 years old, an announcer for Company M, known for managing several popular cable programs that were trending at the time. As they exercised together, she glanced toward him with a teasing smirk and asked who he was trying to flirt with again this time. Woodham, still catching his breath, shot her a quick look and replied that she didn't need to know about that. Choi Jung chuckled, shaking her head slightly, saying that he was obviously up to his usual mischief again. They resumed their workout session. During that moment, Hwang Wudam's phone vibrated with a sudden notification, breaking the quiet rhythm of the room. But before he could react, Choi Jung leaned closer with a teasing grin. She remarked that he had just gotten a notification and joked that it was probably from that girl he had been talking about. Without giving him a chance to respond, she mischievously snatched the phone out of his hand, saying that she absolutely had to see what the girl looked like. Woodham immediately tried to take the phone back. He told her that the girl was pretty, much prettier than her, in fact. Choi Jung's expression changed for a brief moment, somewhere between disbelief and amusement. She looked at the phone and scoffed, saying that it was nothing but a random scam text message. He quickly reached forward and took the phone back from her hand, telling her firmly but not harshly to give it to him. As he looked down at the screen, his teasing smile faded into confusion. It wasn't a personal message at all. Instead, the screen showed a strange web notification, something about an alumni reunion being held on an abandoned island. The title itself felt oddly mysterious. Meanwhile, in a completely different place, the atmosphere of a gym was filled with the metallic echo of weights clanking. Among the noise stood a girl who looked intensely focused, her movements precise and powerful. Her name was Park Hannah, a fifth-year graduate student athlete from University known for being one of the top 3 powerlifters capable of lifting an astonishing 370 kilograms. She was also a personal trainer at the Gangnam Fitness Center, admired by many around her. People often gathered nearby whispering to each other about her strength and dedication. Some expressed envy, while others simply watched her in admiration, calling her obsessed or crazy for the way she pushed her body beyond its limits. But Hannah barely heard them. Inside her mind, her thoughts were sharp and determined. She told herself that she was still far from where she needed to be. If she wanted to win the upcoming competition, she had to surpass herself, because the world outside was filled with monsters. Her phone suddenly buzzed on the bench beside her. She picked it up, but when she saw the screen, she blinked in confusion. It was an unfamiliar notification, something about an alumni reunion on an abandoned island. For a brief second, she just stared, her breathing slowing as a strange feeling of curiosity flickered in her chest. Elsewhere, in a dimly lit garage that smelled faintly of oil and metal, a young man worked with quiet concentration. The sound of a wrench turning echoed softly as he leaned over the hood of a car. His name was Han Tae-sung, a fifth-year graduate who had once been known as the leader of all the bullies in his class. Now, however, his life has taken a different turn. He was learning the trade of car repair, working diligently under the guidance of a mechanic. His phone, resting on a nearby shelf, lit up with a new notification. He glanced at it absent-mindedly, expecting a message from a client or his boss. But when he saw the words Alumni Reunion, Abandoned Island, he froze for a second, his expression blank. In another corner of the city, a girl was sitting in a tattoo studio, carefully etching designs onto her arm. Smoke curled upward from the cigarette held loosely between her fingers. Her name was Kang Soo-jung, another fifth-year graduate, once known as a troublemaker and bully in her class. She now studied at a community college. When her phone buzzed on the table, she picked it up lazily and glanced at the notification. It mentioned something about an alumni reunion. She scoffed under her breath, taking another drag from her cigarette. The message looked ridiculous to her, something that felt like a cheap prank or one of those strange scam links that popped up out of nowhere. At the same time, in a dark room, illuminated by multiple computer screens, another young man sat hunched over his desk. Lines of code flashed across the monitors, and the steady sound of his typing filled the silence. His name was Park Hoshik, a fifth-year graduate who had once been considered a loser by his peers, a bread shuttle who used to run errands for bullies. But now, his reputation was completely different. He had become a skilled hacker and programmer. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the glowing text on his screen. Almost there, he muttered to himself, just a little more work. And then, with a triumphant chime, a success notification appeared. His face lit up with excitement as he shouted that he had finally managed to hack into an overseas server. Just then, Siri's voice broke through his excitement, calmly informing him that he had received a new message. He glanced at his phone, slightly irritated, and asked about the message. Siri read it aloud that it was an invitation to an alumni reunion. His excitement dimmed into curiosity, then suspicion. He muttered to himself that it seemed like an obvious phishing link, but his curiosity got the better of him. After a brief hesitation, he clicked it. At the same moment, all the others who had received the same notification stared at their screens with similar confusion and surprise. Despite their different lives, each of them made the same decision: to click the link. A loading symbol appeared on all their screens, spinning slowly before fading into black. Then suddenly a figure appeared, a man wearing a mask, his face hidden, voice calm yet eerie. He greeted them, addressing them as the seniors of Class 5. He asked if they were ready to escape from their dull, ordinary lives and step into a world filled with adventure. Finally, he announced that the alumni reunion on the abandoned island event was about to begin. The screen shimmered, and then a glowing start button appeared in front of them. For a moment, no one moved. Then, one by one, their fingers hovered closer to the screen, curiosity mixing with a faint, inexplicable sense of dread. Han Seo-jung stood beside Lee Sung-tae, her eyes fixed on the flickering screen in front of them. The man appearing on it was wearing a mask that covered almost his entire face. His movements made them slightly awkward and unsettling. She couldn't help but feel uneasy, her mind running through questions she couldn't quite form. Sung-tae, standing with his arms loosely crossed, asked whether the game was really about to begin. His tone carried a mix of curiosity and suspicion, though he tried to appear calm. Both of them were freshmen in the university's mathematics department. Seo-jung murmured that something didn't feel right about this. There was a strangeness in the man's appearance that went beyond the mask. It was the way he seemed to know things he shouldn't. She couldn't understand how someone like that could know they were first-year students or even connected to the senior year group. The thought sent a chill down her spine, and she wondered if they had unknowingly given away their information somewhere online. Sung-tae, however, tried to reason with her uncertainty. He suggested that maybe the man had scraped data from all the senior classes across the country, collected whatever information he could find, and sent out the same invitation message to everyone. He said perhaps it was just a random selection, and they were simply unlucky or lucky enough to be included. He added that since the message didn't seem to be asking for any kind of payment, clicking the link probably wouldn't cause much harm. In his mind, he wondered if this was just another one of those online marketing stunts or some hidden survey disguised as a game. Sojung glanced at him, unsure whether to trust that reasoning. Her hands were slightly trembling as she asked if he was certain this would be fine. Yet, after a moment of silence, both of them, drawn by curiosity, stronger than caution, pressed the start button together. The man on the screen immediately began to speak again. He thanked all of them for beginning the game and said he could understand how suspicious they might feel. According to him, it was natural to be cautious in a world full of con artists and deception. Then he continued with a strange assurance, saying that to prove his sincerity and put their doubts to rest, he would send each participant a sum of 10,000 in return for joining the game. As he spoke, a new section appeared on the screen, displaying fields labeled with bank name and account number. The text blinked softly, inviting them to enter their information. Everyone watching the stream, including Sojung and Sungtae, stared in disbelief. Meanwhile, across town, Choi Yeso was leaving the dance studio with her teammates after a long practice session. Her teammates were chatting cheerfully, telling each other a good job everyone had done, and saying their goodbyes. Yesu, sleep tight, one of them called out playfully as they parted ways. She replied with a soft smile, brushing her hair away from her forehead as she stepped out into the quiet night air. She didn't notice the faint clicking sound nearby, the discreet shutter of a camera. On the other side of the street, Yu Sang-yoon, a man in his mid-20s and a former senior from Class 5, stood partially hidden, taking pictures of her with quiet fascination. He had been following her progress as a dancer for some time now. Unemployed and spending most of his days alone, he had developed an unhealthy fixation on her, convinced that she was destined to become famous. Later that night, Sang-yoon sat in his small, dimly lit room, his computer screen glowing in front of him. He opened the folder filled with the photos he had just taken and stared at them one by one. The images showed her walking beneath the streetlights, her expression calm and unaware. He murmured to himself that if she ever debuted as a professional dancer, he would attend every one of her performances just to cheer for her. Suddenly, a notification appeared on his phone. It was a message about a class reunion that was planned to take place on a deserted island. The moment he saw it, he froze for a second, feeling both shock and curiosity. The idea itself felt unbelievable. But if it was real, it could be a chance to enjoy a great time with Choi Yesu, the one person whose presence could make the whole event special for him. He thought to himself that even if there was no money involved, it didn't matter much. The thing that mattered more was her. Driven by a mix of excitement and disbelief, he typed his name and account number into the form on his phone, confirming his participation and submitting the details to receive the money that came with the invitation. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, at a small, cozy get-together, Naeunha was sitting among her college friends. The atmosphere was casual. One of the girls there suddenly began talking about her TOEIC score, complaining that no matter how much she studied, her marks just wouldn't go up. She sighed and asked the group if anyone could recommend a good textbook or language class to help her improve. Eunha listened silently, feeling detached from the topic. She thought it was strange to bring up something like test scores while they were drinking and trying to relax. Her thoughts drifted, and she wondered why people couldn't let go of academic talk, even for a short while. Just then, the boy sitting next to her leaned slightly closer and told her that she should try completing her major coursework with Professor Choi. He added that Professor Park was quite famous, but since he was always busy, he was rarely seen at the university. Eunha's eyes wandered across the table, and in her mind, she couldn't help but think how awkward it was that even during a casual drink, the only subject these upperclassmen could discuss with female juniors was schoolwork. She felt a quiet irritation building inside her. Another girl at the table joined in, saying that if anyone ever planned to study abroad for English, it would be better to go to the United States instead of Canada. Eunha thought to herself that such a discussion should have stayed within a study group, not been brought up here. As she watched the others speak with forced smiles, every one of them acted kind and well-mannered, but beneath the surface, they all seemed pretentious and dull. She thought about how empty such conversations were, polite words with no warmth or real connection. Her name was Na Eunha, a senior at Y University, majoring in business management. Among her classmates, she had the reputation of being a bit of a delinquent, someone who didn't always follow the crowd or or fit in with the typical university student image. At another place entirely, two boys were making a scene of a fight, laughing and boasting loudly. They had just finished beating up a few men. One of them shouted that they had beaten all of them and asked the onlookers if it was their first time witnessing something like this. They referred to one of their own as the super psycho, Shin Chang-sub. Sitting nearby was a wealthy man named Park Ah-hin, the kind of everyone despised but could not ignore. He was known for using his money to treat others like they were beneath him, like dogs. People whispered that he was born into wealth and privilege, untouched by struggle. Among them was another notorious figure, a man known as the Human Warhead, Han Taesung, a name that carried both fear and admiration. In another corner of that same place, a girl and a boy were bullying a man. The girl was sitting right on top of him, her expression cold and playful, while the boy beside her taunted the victim for not even knowing how to stay still. The man being bullied tried to defend himself weakly, reminding them that last time they had told him it was just supposed to be a massage chair. The scene was cruel, and the air around them was heavy with humiliation. The girl's name was Kang Soo-jung, infamous for her toxic personality and manipulative behavior. The boy accompanying her was Kim Cheol, known for being deceitful and underhanded, someone who found amusement in others' misery. Back at the get-together, Eunha's mind wandered. She began recalling her former classmates, the people she had known so well. Every single one of them, flawed, arrogant, or cruel in their own way. Despite thinking they were all trash, she missed them. Her thoughts were interrupted when her phone buzzed suddenly. She glanced down and saw a notification on the screen. It was about the class reunion, the same one that others had received, and it even mentioned a monetary reward for attending. The idea caught her attention immediately, and she felt a spark of curiosity. After a moment of thought, she turned to her friends and said she had to go because something had come up. Her friends looked surprised and asked if she was already leaving. When she nodded, they told her to get home safely. Yoonha left the gathering, stepping out into the cool evening air. As she walked down the street, she called Soo-jung. On the other end, Soo-jung's voice sounded casual as she said that it had been a while. Eunha held the phone closer and asked her where she was. On the other side of the city, at a gymnasium and yoga studio, a girl entered the room, her eyes scanning the space. She murmured softly, almost to herself, that there were far too many people there. She had been hoping to find somewhere quiet, a place where they could be alone for the day. Her name was Na Doyeon, a senior at her university, currently working part-time at a cafe while preparing to become a barista. She had always been meticulous about her plans, and today she had envisioned a peaceful training session away from the crowd. Standing nearby was a boy who seemed to have been expecting her. He was holding something out toward her and said that she should try it. A refreshing sikye, suggesting that it would lift her mood. His name was Choi Sun-ho. They walked together through the yoga training area, moving past the mats and equipment with practiced ease. As they walked, Doyeon leaned close and whispered into his ear, reminding him that they hadn't seen each other in 15 days. She confessed that she had been looking forward to performing the wholesome cardio training with him. Sun-ho responded with a teasing smile, suggesting that if they went to a dark corner, they might manage to cuddle without anyone noticing. Doyeon froze for a moment, surprised by his boldness, and admitted inwardly that even the thought of that alone wasn't enough to satisfy her desires at the moment. They slipped into a corner, the noise of the room fading into the background as they stood closer together. Sun-ho looked at her thoughtfully, reflecting on the strange yet familiar bond they shared. He remembered that she was his high school classmate, Doyeon, and realized how much their relationship had changed since then. They had been in the same class during their senior year, but he had never imagined they would grow so close. He recalled the way they had greeted each other on their walks to and from school, a simple hi exchanged in passing, nothing more. They had lived in the same direction, which meant that their paths crossed frequently, yet interactions were minimal and polite. Everything changed one day after summer break, probably in September when it began raining suddenly in the morning, catching everyone off guard. Sun-ho remembered standing under the shadow of his home and noticing Doyeon struggling in the rain. On impulse, he had called out to her, asking her to come inside for a moment, promising to lend her an umbrella. She thanked him. As they entered, he told her she would catch a cold if she stayed out any longer and insisted she come in. He offered some of his clothes to keep her warm. She hesitated briefly, asking if there was anyone else at home, and he had explained that both of his parents were busy and would not return until after 9. She could relax, he reassured her. Feeling a mixture of gratitude and shyness, Doyeon nodded and excused herself as she headed toward the bathroom. He handed her some of his clothes, mentioning that they might be a little big, and pointed out that the towels were in the cabinet if she needed them. She took them with a mixture of embarrassment and gratitude, admitting softly that it was her first time doing something like this at a boy's house and that she felt she owed him for everything he had done that day. Sunho, in contrast, hadn't thought much of it at first, but as he listened to the shower running, a strange, almost unexplainable feeling began to grow inside him. The sensation was new and unfamiliar, a mix of nervousness and curiosity, and it only intensified as he waited for her to finish. When she finally stepped out of the bathroom, she thanked him quietly. He responded simply saying it was no problem. Yet, despite the casual words, an awkward silence lingered between them. Both of them felt the unusual tension. After a few moments, they moved past it, and the day continued as they ended up doing their wholesome workout session together. Though they were not especially close at that time, this day marked a turning point. That first time had happened unexpectedly, like an accident, and both of them silently agreed that it wasn't part of a romantic relationship. They were not dating, and yet the incident created a subtle, lingering tension between them. On the way to school afterwards, both felt shy and awkward, unsure how to behave around the other. They tried to pretend nothing had happened, reverting to their old routine of only exchanging casual greetings. Doyeon would even say bye as he returned home. However, this unspoken agreement lasted less than a week. Soon, they found themselves back in the same empty, parentless house, doing wholesome cardio training together, which had effectively become their secret hideout. Occasionally, they would even go to a motel for training sessions, yet the dynamic of their relationship remained unchanged. Neither lovers nor simple friends. Their connection seemed to revolve solely around these gymnastic rehearsals, the shared space of physical activity giving shape and meaning to their unusual bond. One day, after finishing a training session, Sunho asked if she would be free the following Sunday. Doyeon teased him, saying she had to wait 10 days, though lately she had been able to make it through 5, suggesting they wait for another day during the week instead. Sunho agreed, and this became another rhythm in their strange relationship. Now, back in the present, both of them had resumed their wholesome cardio session together. Sunho's mind raced with desire, thinking that he wanted to continue so badly right at that moment. Doyeon, however, suggested they should go to a motel, implying privacy and discretion. He shook his head, insisting he couldn't wait, wanting to continue right there in the open space of the gym. She seemed slightly upset by his insistence, but the session went on nonetheless. Around them, people were watching. Doyeon could feel the stares on her, and her awareness made her uneasy. She whispered her discomfort to him, voicing her self-consciousness. Sunho, however, brushed it off, telling her not to care about the onlookers. Doyeon thought to herself that she must be crazy. Na Doyeon held Choi Sunho's hand and helped him stand up, telling him that they should move quickly. Both started walking out of that area together. As they reached another corner, she remarked that he must be going crazy, explaining that her heart had been pounding so hard she thought she was going to die. He laughed and told her that she was overreacting and had actually enjoyed the situation. She turned back, insisting that she had not, but he then mentioned that he had received a strange text on his phone. Looking at his phone, he noticed it was about a class reunion on a deserted island. She also checked her phone and said that she had received the same message. He suggested that it could be spam or a phishing attempt, but she was shocked to see that the invitation also included an offer of money for participation. Encouraged by the possibility, she clicked the start button, hoping that the information was true. When it loaded, both of them were surprised to see a strange man wearing a mask on his face, who apologized and explained that the class reunion game on the deserted island could only begin if at least half of the invitees joined. He further clarified that the game was about the seniors of Hagom High School, Class 5, and that out of the 32 invited participants, 14 had already joined. There was still some time left for the remaining participants to join the game. On the other side, Han So-jung was sitting in her home, quietly looking at her phone. As she scrolled through the message, her thoughts wandered to her alma mater, her former classmates, and even the total number of students who had been contacted. She tried to make sense of the situation, wondering if there was someone behind the scheme. Perhaps it was just a prank from one of the students, or maybe it was something more serious. Someone dangerous trying to lure them into trouble. The thought made her uneasy, and she considered that she should report it immediately before anything bad could happen. Just as she was about to call 112, her phone rang, interrupting her plans. It was Jia calling. A smile spread across Sojung's face as she answered the call. Jia cheerfully told her that she was downstairs at her apartment, waiting for her. Sojung, curious and excited, quickly moved to the terrace to get a better view. She asked if Jia's words were really true, her voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and anticipation. Jia urged her to hurry down, teasing that she had a surprise for her that she would not want to miss. Sojung responded from the terrace, greeting her warmly, and Jia waved from downstairs. Jia, whose full name was Min Jia, was a senior in Class 5, studying in the nursing department at Women's College. She was also the best friend of the class president, Sojung, which made their bond even closer. Encouraged by the thought of seeing her friend, Sojung quickly made her way downstairs, where she encountered Chae-yoon, who was also present. She greeted her warmly, noting that it had been a long time since they had last met, and expressed her hope that she was doing well. Whose full name was Seo Chae-yoon, was also a senior in Class 5. She was currently apprenticing at his father's workshop and was another close friend of the class president, Sojung. Upon seeing her, she could not resist grabbing her face gently, commenting on how tired and worn it looked, and added that life at Burgerland must have been incredibly hectic for her. Sojung laughed lightly, brushing off his comments, and told her to forget about it, explaining that things had indeed been wild. She then asked if there were any part-time jobs available that were easy but still paid well. Her attention then shifted to Jia, who seemed unusually excited. Sojung wondered if something significant had happened to her friend, as her energy was noticeably higher than usual. Before she could ask further, Jia suddenly ran toward her and hugged her tightly, expressing how much she had missed her. Sojung, touched by the gesture, asked about the surprise that Jia had mentioned earlier. Jia smiled mischievously, grabbed her hand, and started dragging her toward another corner, telling her to prepare herself what was coming next. As they moved, Jia led Sojung and Chae-yoon toward her brand new car. Sojung's eyes widened in surprise at the sight of it, and she asked in disbelief if Jia had really bought it. Jia explained that her father had purchased the car for her, but on the condition that she earn all of her living expenses independently, which showed her determination and responsibility. Chae-yoon, still observing the scene, chimed in, saying that Jia had been bothering her all day, insisting that they should celebrate her new car by going for a nighttime drive together. Jia, clearly thrilled, shouted with excitement, announcing that it was time for them to head to the sea at night. As they prepared to leave, Chae-yoon attempted to make an excuse to step away, but Sojung quickly grabbed her, insisting that he was not going anywhere and that she would not go alone. With that, all three of them settled into the car. Jia started the engine and began driving. Sojung sat beside her in the passenger seat, looking around at the surroundings and warning her friend that she was driving very fast, reminding her that the speed limit was 40, showing her safety concern even amidst the excitement of the moment. Jia reassured them with a confident grin, saying that as long as there were no cameras around, there was no reason to worry about going a little fast. Chae-yoon, who was sitting in the back seat, immediately shot back, her voice a mixture of concern and exasperation. She warned her not to speed recklessly, reminding her, half-jokingly, that as a total loser, she had only one life to live. Jia laughed, waving off his concerns, claiming that playing video games had trained her reflexes and made her the best driver anyone could ever know, and Sojung couldn't help but feel a mix of amusement and nervousness as she sat beside Jia. Meanwhile, Chae-yoon's attention drifted to his phone, where she noticed a small island marked on the map, complete with a theme park and a garden. She called out to Jia, questioning whether she was absolutely sure her GPS was working correctly. She was saying that they might be taking the long route, he said cautiously, squinting at the map on his screen. Jia responded immediately, her voice brimming with certainty. She explained that her GPS was perfectly fine and she had tested it the day before while practicing driving with her dad, and there had been no issues. Chae-yoon, still unconvinced, muttered to herself that she was not sure they were heading in the right direction. After a brief silence, Jia turned to both of them with a curious look. She asked if either of them had received that strange text about the class reunion on a deserted island. Chae-yoon immediately asked if she had received it too, admitting that she had assumed it was a phishing scam and had not opened it. Jia explained that she had opened the message and was surprised to find that it included an offer to send 10,000 if she provided her bank account number. Chae-yoon, unsurprised, quickly dismissed it as just another scam. Sojung, however, raised a thoughtful objection. She pointed out that there were far too many unusual details for it to be a simple phishing attempt. Jia nodded in agreement, saying that seeing their high school's name mentioned had made her genuinely concerned. Sojung admitted that this was exactly the reason she had been on the verge of calling the police to report the message. Chae-yoon, ever the voice of reason, told her she shouldn't overthink it, insisting that she should report it immediately before anything worse could happen. As Sojung stared at her phone, debating whether to dial the number, a sudden movement caught their attention. An elk darted across the road in front of their car, creating a momentary but dangerous risk of an accident. Gia's reflexes kicked in instantly, and she swerved sharply, causing the car to tilt and vibrate violently with the sudden maneuver. Meanwhile, at the club, the scene was entirely different. A grand party was underway, the kind that filled the air with music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Inside one of the VIP rooms, a man was seated comfortably, surrounded by two ladies. One of the ladies commented on his attire, noting that he was wearing designer brands like Hermes, Armani, and Ferragamo, though she thought some of the items looked slightly fake. Her voice carried a mixture of admiration and skepticism. Another girl added her observation, noting that while he looked young, he carried an unmistakable air of wealth. She speculated that his father must be exceptionally well off to afford such a lifestyle, her curiosity tinged with envy and awe. Park Ah-hin mentioned that his father was nothing particularly extraordinary, emphasizing that he merely ran a small company and that there was nothing too impressive about him. Curious, the girl asked him to elaborate on the company, seeking more details about it. Park Ah-hin explained that the company was involved in constructing apartment skyscrapers, often in desert areas, and engaged in similar large-scale construction projects. He clarified that it was a construction company. He also shared that he himself was Park Ah-hin, a senior in Class 5 known as a delinquent leader, and importantly, the son of the chairman of S Construction. The girl, still processing this information, asked him in disbelief whether he was truly the son of a chairman of such a large corporation. She added playfully that if this were indeed true, then he should be able to make it rain like they do in music videos. Observing the situation, another girl, Kang Soo-jung, watched silently and skeptically, questioning in her mind whether the first girl actually believed his claims about his family and wealth. The first girl then reached for his wallet, seizing it with a playful boldness. Park Ah-hin responded lightly, warning her that if she picked it up, she would have to keep it, implying that there would be consequences to her actions. She laughed at his comment, telling him that she loved his sense of humor, showing that she was entertained by his personality and confident demeanor. At that point, Park Ah-hin began handing out large amounts of money, spreading bills around in a literal display of wealth. The girl immediately dropped to her knees to gather the scattered money, diligently collecting each bill with focused attention. Kang Soo-jung, observing this, was clearly surprised, remarking on the unusual behavior, and questioned whether the first girl had no pride at all. She thought aloud that this man was supposedly only conducting wholesome exercise training with them, and yet he was displaying such extravagant behavior. Turning to him directly, Kang Soo-jung asked if he genuinely believed he could manipulate people merely because he possessed money. She reminded him that there were many people in the world far wealthier than he was. In response, Park Ah-hin placed a thick bundle of money directly in front of her and instructed her to remove her clothes, promising that if she did so, he would give her all of it. She considered the stack of money, thinking that it must be extremely substantial, perhaps 3,000 or even exceeding 5,000, and realized just how much he was willing to give. Deciding to comply with his request, she asked if he was happy with her response, to which he replied that she should not stop halfway, emphasizing that she needed to fully follow through with his demand. He further asked her to strengthen her fingers and hand muscles in front of him, promising that he would also reward her for completing that task. She was astonished by the sheer amount of money and the thorough fulfillment of all the demands he had set before her, feeling both surprised and overwhelmed by his generosity and influence. Meanwhile, another lady continued to observe everything that was happening, forming her own judgment. She realized that Park Ah-hin was completely different from other men who merely liked to flaunt their money superficially. To her, he belonged to an entirely different class, someone born with a diamond spoon, possessing both wealth and an unmistakable aura of power. Eventually, she approached him and admitted openly that she had, in fact, been searching for a sugar daddy. She told him that she was comfortable with the time, the place, and all the circumstances, and that she was willing to comply with whatever he wanted, expressing her readiness and agreement in a straightforward manner. Suddenly, a waiter entered the room, carrying a tray and serving drinks reserved for the VIP guests. He commented that the atmosphere in the room seemed to have gotten quite intense. His name was Kim Cheol, a senior from Class 5, a delinquent like the others, though not particularly skilled in fighting. He had a reputation for clinging to Park Shin and often relied on him for status and support. Park Ah-hin stood up from his seat, adjusting his jacket slightly, and announced that he had to leave. One of the ladies in the room, confused, asked him where he was going so suddenly. Before Ahin could respond, Cheol spoke up, trying to guess the reason for his departure, saying that the girls seemed fine and wondering why he would leave so soon. Park Ahin replied coolly that he wasn't interested in women who simply did whatever was asked of them, implying that such behavior bored him. Cheol shrugged and remarked that he personally didn't mind that kind of thing at all. Both of them then left the room and stepped outside the club. Park Ah-hin had a cigarette between his lips. He took a drag and complained to Cheol that the place didn't even feel like a proper club, saying that only dull and uninteresting women were there. Cheol, lighting up Ah-hin's cigarette, replied that all clubbing scenes were usually like that anyway. He then changed the subject, asking if Ah-hin had seen something strange on his phone, showing his own device to him. He explained that he had received a message which said that anyone who joined the class reunion game would receive 10,000 in return. According to the message, 16 out of 32 participants had already signed up. Cheol mentioned that he had a strong feeling it wasn't just some kind of phishing scam. He said that his instincts told him this could actually be a huge opportunity. He added, with a grin, that he suddenly found himself wondering how the girls from their class were doing these days. He remarked that girls often became much more attractive once they entered college. They worked out, wore makeup, and benefited from all the wonders of modern beauty science. Laughing, he said that if a real class reunion were happening, then meeting and partying with their old classmates would definitely be far more entertaining than spending time in that boring club. Park Ah-hin agreed with his idea, nodding slightly, and told him to create a group chat for the seniors of Class 5 right away. Cheol smirked, saying that their leader, Park Ah-hin, was truly a man of action. Ah-hin, maintaining his calm and confident demeanor, gave the order to start gathering their old crew together. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Shin Chang-sub was seen mercilessly beating a man on the street. The injured man, barely able to move, pleaded desperately, asking for just one more week to pay his debt. Chang-sub told him not to be afraid, assuring him that he wouldn't kill him, but added coldly that he would be taking a few of his fingers instead. His full name was Shin Chang-sub, another senior from Class 5, a former delinquent who had since become a ruthless loan shark collector. The man on the ground begged again, saying that he had children aged 3 and 5, and pleaded that for the sake of his kids, he needed one more week to gather the money. He promised that he would pay back the 3,000 in every situation. Chang-sub replied with a grim smirk that the insurance company would cover the amount eventually, telling him not to worry about his kids. He added that he himself had grown up just fine without a father. As he said this, his phone buzzed with a notification. He took it out, glanced at the screen, and saw that Kim Cheol had added him to a new group chat titled Senior Class 5 Friends. Curious, he checked the members and noticed that both Park Ah-hin and Cheol were in it. He thought to himself that the old crew must be planning something interesting, probably up to some kind of fun again. Elsewhere, Park Hoshik sat in front of his computer, his eyes fixed on multiple screens as he analyzed the advanced techniques that hackers had been using, focused deeply on understanding every small detail of the system he was investigating. Jia had driven quite far down the road when suddenly an accident took place. As Jia slowly regained her senses and managed to stabilize herself, she immediately turned toward Sojung and Chayun, asking in a worried tone if both of them were all right. Sojung, still slightly shaken but trying to calm Jia down, responded that she was fine. Chayun, touching her head and wincing a little from the pain, added that except for the fist-sized lump forming on her head, she was fine as well. Hearing that, Jia's eyes filled with tears. Her voice broke as she began crying, apologizing repeatedly to them, explaining that the accident had happened because an elk had suddenly appeared on the road. She said she hadn't expected it and lost control trying to avoid hitting the animal. All three of them stepped out of the car to check on the condition of the vehicle. Jia, however, couldn't stop crying. Her hands trembled as she looked at the dented car, and she said that she didn't know about the next, that she was completely lost and screwed. Cheyun tried to remain practical despite the situation. She asked if it was possible that the damage could be covered by Jia's car insurance, adding that maybe if she paid a few $100s, the insurance would take care of the repair. Jia, still crying and wiping her tears, said in a trembling voice that she didn't even have car insurance and that the repair cost would probably be several $1,000s. That confession left Sojung shocked. She looked at Jia in disbelief and asked if what she had just said was really true. Jia nodded and confirmed it, saying that yes, it was true. She added that if that strange text message they had received earlier actually turned out to be real, then she would be able to cover the repair costs for her car immediately without worrying. Chae-yoon, however, wasn't convinced. She said that there was no way such a message could be real. Jia then took out her phone, her eyes widening in surprise as she saw a new notification pop up. It was from Kim Cheol. Chae-yoon, puzzled, asked about it, while Sojung explained that their senior classmates had created a group chat. In that chat, Kim Cheol had sent a greeting message to all his classmates from class 5. Kang Soo-jung, on the other hand, had mocked him, calling him a psycho and saying that making a group chat like that was crazy, especially if he had done it because of that strange text message. Simply laughed at the teasing and admitted that it was true, to which Kang Sojung replied that believing in something like that was ridiculous. Cheol had said that rather than believing, he was simply curious and wanted to see who among them would actually show up. Then Nonha joined the conversation, saying that there was nothing to lose by giving it a try. She suggested that they might as well act foolish for once and see for the next. If the money truly came through, would end up hitting the jackpot. Hearing all that, Jia started crying again and said that for the first time, she actually felt thankful to Kim Cheol and Na Eunha. Since most of the people in the chat were supporting the idea, she felt it would be best to go along with the majority and try to get the money as well. Chae-yoon, however, tried to keep her grounded and warned her not to get her hopes too high. She pointed out that if they were really going to give $10,000 to every classmate, then it would be a huge amount of money overall. Jia, still emotional, told her not to say such things and that she had no choice but to believe that the $10,000 would really come. Chae-yoon sighed, clearly unconvinced, and told her to just forget it. Meanwhile, Sojung stood quietly nearby, listening to the whole conversation unfold. She thought to herself that with this kind of atmosphere, even if some people wanted to refuse, they would have to act carefully and go along with that, the majority decided. Jia, on the other hand, continued to try convincing the others, saying that they could never be completely sure. There was always a chance that the message might actually be true. At the same time, Sojung kept thinking to herself that she really wanted to call the police right away, but she hesitated, feeling concerned about Jia's fragile state. No matter how she tried to make sense of it, she couldn't shake off the feeling that all of this was part of a deliberate trap, something that had been intentionally planned and set up specifically for their class.